when you get into a franchise, where that freedom is, when it's one franchise away, is that freedom that once you get into that one franchise, that you have the freedom to do the things you want to do, which is what I'm doing now. I just need one. I just need my business.
This is Brandon Turner, and you are listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. So Tanya and I just had an awesome interview. We're going to talk about it a little bit before we actually cut into this episode. So Tanya, what do you think about that conversation we had with our guest, Gregory Mohr?
Yeah, it was really great to just learn more about franchising because I have some friends and family who are in franchises, but I've never really looked into it. And so I just think it's a really good opportunity and way for people who are interested in maybe entrepreneurship or having their own business to hear this story and hear Greg talking about it, because he has a lot of experience. And I think he gave a lot of insights. I had so many questions I could have kept asking about like the whole thing.
Yeah, well, actually, you asked some amazing questions, if I do say so myself. But what I thought was really interesting was he dove a little bit deeper into the who this is a good fit for and who this isn't a good fit for. And I really appreciate that, right? Because he even says it too, like franchising is not for everybody. And a lot of times you'll have people that go on podcasts and they're just like, oh yeah, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And like no discrimination at all, right? Like, oh, this is for everybody. Well, no, it's a lot of times things are not for everybody. Like this might not be your cup of tea, right? So I really appreciate that dialogue that we had with him and sharing some of the successes and failures that he's seen in the franchising industry. So it was just pretty fun.
I liked that. I liked the pros and cons. And then I also liked how he brought around, or in the beginning, how he talks about franchising was something that came to him as an idea as a kid, as one of his first jobs. That was always, it wasn't just like he randomly fell into it. It was very intentional. And it was something that he was in a franchise. He worked in a franchise at a Taco Bell when he was younger, and then was in the corporate world forever, but always had this idea in the back of his mind. And he followed that voice and actually turned it into his own franchise, and then now into a consulting. So I thought that was really cool, because it's like we always have those ideas, right? But we don't do anything with them, like you were saying.
Yeah, no, I love that. A lot of times you'll get something kind of like a seed planted in your head, and then if it doesn't get watered, it just sits there, and then eventually some water sprinkles on it, the idea sprouts, and you're like, oh yeah, this was something I wanted to do a long time ago. Let me look into it, right? I feel like for me, like the same thing happened to me with real estate. When I was younger, I used to talk to my uncle about it all the time, and it was just always in the back of my head. So when I finally did it, I was like, oh yeah, I started to remember these conversations that I had with them. I think stuff like that is just pretty awesome. So I think our listeners are going to really enjoy this episode.
Yeah. And I especially like too, like how he got into the numbers a little bit more, because I'm like, what are the numbers? I'm not afraid to ask, like, how much is it going to cost, or what? And so I think definitely listen if you are just whether you've never thought about franchising before. Here's the numbers breakdown on a loose term. And then if you have more questions, you can reach out to Greg and he'll explain it to you and go into what might work for you.
Awesome. All right. And with that, let's get into today's episode.
If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you're listening to our podcast, go leave us a 5-star review. All of our links can be found in the video description or show notes below.
Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavagioni.
And I'm your co-host, Tanya Schultz.
And today's guest is not a stranger to the podcast. He was here on episode 235, Gregory Mohr. So Greg, super excited to have you back on the show. Welcome back to the podcast.
Great to be back, Mike. And I'm glad to be back now that we have another host on the show as well. That's a nice change.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm excited about it too. It's so far it's been pretty fun having Tanya here. She's been awesome. Kind of like the yin to my yang, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like the show is complete now.
Yeah.
So, all right. Hey, so Greg, you already know the deal, how I like to do this show. And Tanya knows it too, because this is the way she likes to do the show as well. It's one of the reasons why she was the top pick to be my co-host. But if you could, we're going to start things off the same way we start every episode. For those that have not watched or listened to episode 235, can you give us a rundown on your background and tell us a little bit about your story and tell us who is Gregory Mohr?
Thank you, Mike. So for those who didn't listen to the other episode, I do franchising. Basically, I help ambitious entrepreneurs find a great fit in the world of franchising. Or if you're a business owner, I can help flip your business into a franchise as well. So that's basically in a nutshell. I work with many different franchisors, been doing it for about 12 years, but I got my start a long time ago. And we were just talking about this before the show about how I got my start into franchising, which was in high school. But if we go back just a tad bit further than that into the Wayback Machine, my world of entrepreneurship actually started with me getting a paper route. So I've always liked, being in control of where the money comes from. Of course, our family wasn't extremely rich or anything like that. So kind of working stiff. So a little bit extra always helped. So I don't know if anybody remembers paper routes or have ever had a paper route where they delivered papers and then went door to door actually collecting. So door to door, knock on the door, collecting for the Democrat. So that's where I got my start. We actually had to collect the money ourselves, turn some of it over to the Democrat. We kept some of it for ourselves. I don't know that they do that anymore, but that's where I basically got my start in entrepreneurship. Then fast forward a little bit, in high school back in the 70s, kind of dating myself there a little bit, a lot of us got our start in fast food places. So for whatever reason, I picked Taco Bell. They're probably hiring at the time, or maybe I knew the manager over there. But I got into the world of Taco Bell and fast food, and I moved up in that in there pretty quick. Started managing some restaurants rather young. At a rather young age, I started managing, co-managing or assistant managing the restaurants. But I actually turned 18 while I was in high school. So I actually got to skip a week of high school once to go manage another Taco Bell restaurant, which I thought was the greatest thing in the whole wide world. Hey, skip a week of high school and I got to go be boss of all these people. But it turned out, as I found out through that, she was actually, she is actually a master franchisor, and she owned 50 Taco Bells throughout the Sacramento, California, Woodland, California area. So that was really my first foray into franchising. And I went around to many of her different restaurants throughout the Sacramento, California area and helped her build up her restaurants. Great system in that, in the franchising world, and Taco Bell in particular, but in the franchising world, you just step into anyone in there and it's the same thing. It's the same playbook. Easy to run, easy to operate. And that really stuck in my head for a while. I went on to manage other restaurants after that, moved up into a Lions restaurant, kind of like a Denny's restaurant, upscale Denny's restaurant. Did that, got bored with that, went to school, got a degree in engineering and physics, became a microelectronic circuit engineer. Then while I was doing that, another engineering friend of mine, we bought dry cleaners, a privately owned dry cleaners. We bought some storage units together. So I kind of did that on the side. That was kind of my side gig with my partner. Ran those, and then I bought a couple of real estate properties and did some rental properties management on that. And then I decided to get a master's degree in business. While I was doing that, I read Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that was the end of my corporate career, basically, on that one. He ruined my corporate career for me. It's like, wow, there's something better out there, and I don't have to do this, and I don't have to be an employee. I'm stuck in there from 9 to 5, in my case, 7 to 5 all the time. So I got out of that world. Both my partner and I, who was running the dry cleaners, we both got out of there at the same time. We both got laid off. I think it was one of those blessings in disguise on there, because that really set the stage for, okay, now is the time to do something different with your life. You read Robert Kiyosaki's book. That's probably the reason why I got laid off. One of the managers, I think, realized the fact that my heart just wasn't in it anymore. And I already knew that at that point in time. I liked the work. I didn't like working 7 to 5 too much. But I sold off all my stuff to my partner. He took over the private owned business. And that notion of franchising always for the last, so I was 30 years in the corporate world. So 30 years in the corporate world, I always thought about that franchising thing. That was always stuck in the back of my mind there about how much fun I had and how much I enjoyed, working for that master franchisor and doing that franchise stuff. So I said, I got to get back into that somehow or another. I got to figure out a way to get back in that because that was fun. I know I would enjoy it. And that was it. I started looking around, got into franchising.
Wow, that's cool. You always had that 30 years of going into corporate, but it sounded like you had that entrepreneurial spirit at a young age. So did that transition to, like, how did you then go from like, okay, now I'm going to start franchising? What did that look like? Because there's so many franchises, there's so many, it's confusing, right? And I know that now you help people with this, but how did you figure that out?
So that's interesting. That was, I didn't want to go too far into the last story because I'd be here for the rest of the afternoon and go too far. So I'll try and break it up into blocks. So the next part of the story is, how did I get into franchising? So I had no idea how to get into franchising at that point in time. So I did with what a lot of my people did to start off with, is go onto the internet and just start clicking on things. And I went click happy. And then I had 20 different franchise development people calling me from all over the place saying, yeah, our franchise is great. Our franchise is great. I finally got a hold of a franchise consultant. Who knew they existed? I sure didn't. And the franchise consultant, and I got a hold of a couple of them, but one was just really outstanding. He just said, okay, stop, tell everybody to take a pause on that. Let's take a look at, where have you been? Where are you at now? Where do you want to be? So he really streamlined that process for me and made it less confusing. So if you think about it, think about the boxes in your head are golden. Think about that statement. Everything that you know, all the experiences that you had, everything that you've done in life, that's a lot of gold in there. I mean, you're successful in the past, you've done great things in the past. All of that can be put to use in the franchising world. So where are you at now is more like, what kind of time do you have to invest? What kind of money do you have to invest in that? And then where do you want to be? What do you see that franchise doing for you, and why are you even looking into franchising to begin with on that? So he really helped me narrow it down, streamline the process, made it much, much less confusing, and got me into a very nice Schooley Mitchell telecommunications consulting franchise, which I did that for a couple of years. That was great. I got to work from home, be my own boss. I love that. And then after a couple of years of that, I was thinking that I really liked doing what that franchise consultant was doing, because he was helping people out all over the United States, basically all over the world is what we do out there, and realize their dreams. So I thought, I've got to let other people know that there is a way other than the corporate world, just like Robert Kiyosaki says, you be an investor, you be a business owner, to realize your dream and have the time that you want to do when you want, to do what you want when you want.
Hey, Greg, that's awesome, because it makes me think about your book, right? And how chapter 1, okay, here's his book right here, by the way, people, Real Freedom, right? And how in chapter 1, the name of the chapter is Freedom is One Franchise Away, right? So can you tell me what that means? Freedom is one franchise away. Because I think this is kind of what we're leading up to with where we're going in your story right now.
So yeah, great question, Mike and Tanya. That freedom is one franchise away. So your very first franchise, the one that you start with, is your road to success. Now, I want to preface that with saying that I'm not going to tell you that franchising is great for everybody. I'm not going to tell you that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, because for some people, it's not. Don't do it. Go in and do your own business. Start your own business. Turn it into a franchise. All those other franchises did. But freedom is definitely one franchise away, because that is the start of you turning your dreams into entrepreneurship. If you don't have the latest, greatest idea, like I did not, then that's what the franchise world is all about. Somebody else has created a step-by-step process, already made all those mistakes. Like we made a lot of mistakes when we bought that dry cleaners and we bought those storage units. All sorts of mistakes we were making along the way. Franchise has done all that for you. So yes, you pay a little extra for it. But what you're paying for is the fact that all those mistakes are done, taken care of. This is the playbook. This is step-by-step playbook. So once you get into that, that's just the start of your path towards freedom, whatever freedom means to you, either out of the corporate world, more time with your family, building a legacy, whatever your freedom may be, that's just, it just starts with one.
Yeah, I love that. That's really, it's just another path to entrepreneurship, because like you said, a lot of people want to have that freedom. But I feel like a lot of people would say, well, it must be expensive to get. One of the biggest hurdles, right, is having the money to put into a franchise or figure out. Like you said, obviously what you do is helping people figure that out. But what do people normally pay for the average franchise? I don't know if there's an average, but like give somebody an idea of what that looks like to start a normal franchise, like a regular franchise that people would think about.
Great question, Tanya. And a lot of my people that are coming to me and that I work with know just about the brick and mortar franchises. So Mike, Tanya, when you drive around, when we drive around, what do we see all the time? We see the McDonald's, we see the Taco Bell, we see Supercuts, Great Clips, Meineke, Mako. That's what we think about when we think about a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because that's what we see. A brick and mortar franchise, you build it and they will come. General theme on that, great one. So when you're talking to average, great question. I'll go with two averages for you on there. Brick and mortar average. So brick and mortar average is probably, I would say, around $500,000 grand total. Okay, a lot of people think it's like McDonald's, $1 million, you got to work full time. Nope, not the case. Okay, brick and mortar average is probably 400,000. A salon, a hair salon, something like that, a little bit less. You get into something like the McDonald's, Taco Bell, big restaurants, big build out, a little bit more. But yeah, 500,000 average on that one. What people don't know about a lot of is the services industry. So the services industry is where people don't necessarily know you exist until they need you. That average, Tanya, is around $150,000, give or take. Now, when we're thinking about services industry, what are we thinking about? Well, essential services, heating and air conditioning, electrical, plumbing, home services, senior care, taking care of mom and dad, tutoring, building services as well as a good service industry, which is real huge, and working with business owners to make them more improved. Sandler sales training is one. Focal point business training is another, where you can work from home when you go out visit with your clients. So, Tanya, two answers, correct answers: 500, 150, brick and mortar services.
That's great. Yeah, that's really helpful. I think that just gives people an idea.
It's interesting though, because I think last time you were on, I was talking to you about, I have a friend of mine that he's a real estate investor as well. So he got into a junk removal franchise that he's a part of and started off really well. I talked to him like 2 weeks ago and just asked him like, hey, how's the franchise going? How's all that stuff going? He's like, I'm buying more areas now. He's like, the dude profited like 400K last year. And like, he's had the franchise for a year and a half. And I'm like, dude, what? It was very interesting to have that conversation with him, but he's building it up and eventually he's going to sell it. Right. So like that was his whole thing, was to build it up, sell it, and then just stick with real estate. I was like, dude, that is insane. But what he's doing is he knows all the real estate investors in the area. Right. So as they're doing these renovations and these projects, he's like, hey, my junk removal service is here to get rid of all that stuff while you guys are doing these renovations. So he's tied it into something that he's already doing. So I see a lot of people that get into any type of franchise. If they have another business or something else that they're doing, they try to find something that they can use that kind of benefits the other, right? So like one hand washes the other, and it's just awesome.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, Greg, how often do you see things like that happening where somebody will get into a franchise that complements something else that they're already doing?
Quite often on that, Mike. Oh, it's kind of amazing. I had Ben and Trisha that I was working with, real estate investors, just like you were mentioning there. They did a lot of real estate, and they wanted to diversify on that. So they said that they really like going to the local brewery on there. So they wanted to own a brewery. That'd be really cool. So okay, we can take a look at that. So I go through the same process I go through with everybody, and then we decided we'd take a look at a couple others on there. And they ended up getting into an electrical services franchise, complete opposite from the brewery, because amazingly enough, I was talking with Ben most of the time. Trisha was there. She had a lot of good questions, but she was in the background. I work with the real estate. I'm not going to do anything. Ben's going to run a semi-absentee, so we're not going to do it. So I'm just supporting him. At the very end, Trisha steps up and goes, and after she learned about the business, she stood up and said, we're not going to run that semi-absentee. I can do that as well as the real estate. That's an easy business to run because I work with those types of people all the time. They're the same people I work with. It's no different. So I get quite a few real estate people, especially, Mike, that get into the home services because just like your friend, not only do they need them for their businesses, but they have all sorts of other people. As you get out there into real estate, you get to know now you can help others out as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense if you can tie that together. And what was your friend's, Mike? That was junk removal?
Yeah, they do junk removal. Yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, and that it kind of makes me think about another question I wanted to ask you, Greg, and this ties into something that Tanya was talking to you about when we're talking about the price, right, of starting a franchise. Because this podcast, we're talking to average Joes and Janes, right? So we're here to show them that it's possible at their level as well, right? And now I know in your book, I think it's chapter 5, right, is where you talk about the financial part of it, right? And like financing. So I'm not going to cheat because I already read that section and say it for you. But if you could tell us a little bit about like how do you see people financing a franchise if they don't have any money to start with?
Right. If they really don't have any money to start, talking about, about $20,000 cash, good credit, and that's about it, and a couple $100,000 net worth, then you would go the SBA route. So the SBA is pretty simple. It would be an express loan for services industry. The getting a loan for franchise is pretty easy because the franchises have that proven record, that background of a proven record on there. So that part's simple. As long as you've got a good credit, and for an express loan for around $150,000, $200,000, you're going to be put down about $20,000, and that's about it on that one. The other thing you can do is, if you're like me and got laid off and had a 401k plan from a previous employer, you can use your 401k plan. So other people's money or your own money, if you have a retirement plan, you can use that as well. I'd say, Mike, it's probably about 50-50 that go with the using the retirement funds or going with an SBA or a HELOC or something like that.
That's great. Yeah, that's really good to know, because I know obviously starting your own business in general, right? There's risk, and that's why a lot of people don't step into entrepreneurship and are just scared. So what is it like what can people expect, I guess? How much risk are they taking on? Obviously, it depends on the franchise. Are you the one that's showing them their potential return on investment based on the business and all that? Like, how do they know if it's going to make money? Because I know sometimes it might take time to recoup what they put in, right?
Absolutely. There's a couple of things when you're talking about risks that they're telling you that we take a look at on that one. The first one, if you want to reduce your risk quite a bit, then what you want to be looking at is a franchise that has been in operation for a number of years on that one. So the first thing is just the background of that franchise itself on there. There's probably 500,000 or so franchises in the U.S. here today, and I think about 5% of them make it to 100 franchisees or more. So if you want to start off with your risk of just making sure that you've got a good solid system behind you where they've replicated it and duplicated it many times over, then you probably want to stick with a franchise that has 100 or more franchisees on that one. Now, the other part of your question is your return on investment. I will not be showing them their return on investment because the Federal Trade Commission says, no, you don't collect that data. You don't get to give out that data. I know what it is because they tell me, because I'm not buying a franchise, so these guys can tell me and girls can tell me anything. However, we will get that information for you along the way on that. What we're going to do is in those franchise disclosure documents that you will be going over with the franchise development folks, in there will be a financial disclosure information on item number 19, where they gather the information from their franchisees to show how much, like that, the top 25%, the bottom 25%, the average franchisee is making on that. In addition to that, after we get through with that franchise development person, you're going to talk with as many franchisees as possible to verify and validate that information.
Okay.
Now, some people are thinking, what am I going to just ask these franchisees how much they're making? Well, yeah. They were in this same boat you were at one point in time. They're asking that same question before they got into it, and they are more than happy to tell you all about it. Matter of fact, they're more than happy to tell you about the good, the bad, and the ugly when you talk to them. So you'll get an earful when you talk to them. But as a direct answer to your question, Tony, that's how we find out, through the franchise disclosure documents, item number 20, financial disclosures, and then verifying and validating all that information with franchisees that we talked to.
Yeah, so there's a lot of prep going into, obviously. It takes some time to put all that together and make sure it's the right decision based on all those things. Yeah, my cousin just opened a franchise. It's like waxing and service, like female services type business. And he did a lot of, he did research on all kinds of different things. And so, yeah, he's really excited about it. And they're doing well so far. So, yeah, it's really, I think it's cool because he'd been in real estate too. And obviously with the market and loans and everything, was trying to figure out what his next move was. But what are some of the top franchises that you're seeing right now? Like, what are some of the good ones that you're noticing that you think are some of the best ones that people could look into?
So if we go back to the risk assessment value and the money making potential value on the different types of franchises, then what you probably want to be looking at is something like, for instance, the Belfort Group, service industry type ones. So people are not necessarily familiar with these. So the Belfort Group, if you're not familiar with them, think of Katrina, when we had that big hurricane that wiped out all those places. Somebody had to clean it up. The Belfort Group is the largest restoration company in the world. Okay, they did have to clean up for Katrina. Well, they have 1-800 water damage, amongst other things. They've got a few they've got 5, 6, 7 different franchise groups within them. So they're a huge company. that does all sorts of things, franchising. Think about that. They're one of the better ones on that one. So that's a good one to get into. Ones that people may have heard about but didn't realize was a franchise. The Neighborly Group, for instance, they're the largest home services franchise, largest home services company in the United States. So if you're thinking about AirServe, thinking about Molly Maids, Grounds Guys, Windows Genie, they have 20 different franchises in their group, and all but one that they just acquired all have more than 100 franchisees in there. And then we get into Authority Brands, which is also a services franchise. On there, they have 1-800, what are they? No, they have 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning, Benjamin Franklin Plumbing, and Mr. Sparky, and they've got a few others as well. And those ones are huge. They bring in just loads and loads of money. And again, way more than 100 franchisees in each one of their systems. Great business to get into. If it's broke, it's got to be fixed. It's got to be fixed now. Doesn't matter what the economy is doing. You're not going to go be outside. Neighbors aren't going to appreciate that. So if that plumbing breaks, you're going to get somebody in there.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think some of the things you got to look at, Greg, are, I guess, not like safe from a recession, but what's more recession proof, right? Because the current financial environment that we're in today, right now, it's like we keep teetering on whether or not the country is going to go into default or the market's going to keep going up, right? It's like one day you hear it's the end of the world financially, and then the next day you hear we're doing great. So it's like sometimes it's really hard to wrap your head around it, right? So somebody that might want to get into a franchise now might think, okay, maybe I want to do something that's going to be a safer bet for me, that it's a service industry that I know no matter what happens to the economy, people will still need this, right? So I think that's a very good point there. Is there anything else that you would add to that, or do you think I got that right?
You hit the nail on the head with that one, Mike. I still put people into other types of franchises all the time. They
Sure.
still enjoy those. As Tony was pointing out, females like to spend money, and they like to look. And it doesn't matter.
Not saying males can't get waxed too.
That's the name of the episode. Females like to spend money. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Hey, nay, hey.
Okay, they like to look good. Maybe I should rephrase that. Maybe that's not too good. Too sexist. They like to look good. They like to feel
Hey,
good.
I
like to look
oiled my beard and I
Yeah.
put the beard butter in today. Okay.
good. Yeah. Again,
I
too sexist.
yeah.
Grooming.
We like to look good. We like to feel good. Things that are going to make us look good and
Fresh
feel good,
shave.
we're going to spend money on. Waxing your head, taking that off there. That's going to do it. Fitness. I still put people into the fitness industry, just not big box fitness. It's more boutique fitness.
Okay.
And then health services, chiropractic, urgent cares, pain management, weight loss, that sort of thing. That's still huge. So still a lot of them, but Mike, you're right. For the most part, most of my folks in general have been going for more essential type services lately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
And how many do you still own franchises yourself, or what's your situation now with how do you work with people and how are they finding you?
So I do not own any franchises now. I did that telecommunications consulting franchise working with business owners, sold that one off and got out of that after about 2 years because I got too busy with my consulting service on that. I didn't want to spend time on anything else because I like other things besides just making money.
What?
I know.
You like helping
Amazing.
people too?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. The waxing studio is a big thing I head down there on a regular basis. So you check out. No, I'm just kidding. The work-life balance. When you get into a franchise, where that freedom is, when it's one franchise away, is that freedom that once you get into that one franchise, that you have the freedom to do the things you want to do, which is what I'm doing now. I just need one. I just need my business. That way I'm free to go out there and I've got a whole bunch of critters, a whole bunch of plants that I take care of. Sustainable living is what I do. People find me right now through my book. Amazingly enough, after I wrote that 2 years ago, I get a lot of people that do that. And I get a lot of people off of that watch these wonderful podcasts that I'm on, like Mike's and Tony's podcast.
Great.
On that, I get quite a few people that say, "Hey, I saw you on that podcast."
Yeah.
So I love doing that. So Tony, that's mostly where I get my people, is from people reading my book and then going on these wonderful podcasts.
Awesome. All right, Greg. So I have to ask you now, for as far as you helping people, right? So you are now full-time doing franchise consulting. Do you feel like that you have removed yourself from franchising itself just to go full-time into consulting, or do you still feel really connected to it? Or I guess really, when was the last time you owned a franchise versus doing full-time consulting? If that's a better question.
Yeah. So I got into my franchise back in 2012. So that was about
Okay.
12 years ago. Did that for a couple of years, and I did this and that at the same time for a while. So 2014 was the last time I was in a business of my own. Now, in addition to helping people get into franchising, what I do is I go out and visit with franchisors. So I don't actually run any franchises, but I'll go out there and visit with them at their place of business, see what their operations are all about. That's what other than helping people, that's where I spend a lot of my time, is either on the phone with them, learning about what they do, or I will go out there and visit with them, see what they're all about. Make certain I like them, make sure they're good people
Yeah.
on that.
Awesome. Yeah, because I was curious, Greg, like as a franchise consultant, if you had your own franchise, is there like a conflict of interest there? Is that one of the reasons why, like when you were doing both, you said, okay, I need to do like one or the other, right? Because I feel like maybe you would push people more towards like the one that you're involved in because it might be better for you that way. So I feel like it's kind of a good thing, right, that you are not in a franchise right now and just full-time consulting, because you can give people a very unbiased opinion on what fits them best, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, Mike. Very, very, very true. But amazingly enough, a lot of franchise consultants do get into franchising because we get to know them really well on a regular basis. So quite often you'll get into that and they might step away from franchising. It's a different world depending on what you're into. People think that you get into franchising, you're buying a job, and that's just not the case. You're buying a business as long as that business doesn't revolve around you. When I got into franchise consulting, I bought myself a job because I didn't want to do or work with anybody else. I'd been a restaurant manager, I had 50 employees for a long time. And I'm like, no, none of that anymore. But there are still quite a few franchise consultants that they get into their own franchises. And then they have a tendency kind of to step away from the consulting business for a while because they keep kind of busy with one or the other.
Sure. All right.
Yeah. Who do you think franchises, like, who do you say this isn't for you? Is it somebody who's not really entrepreneurial or like that? Who would you say on average is like, okay, maybe this isn't a right fit, or just
Good question.
Yeah, great question. That's one of the things that I try and find out right away, so we're not spending too much time together. If you're not coachable, is the biggest one. Yeah, because
I know that for a fact.
yeah, because if you're not coachable, because that's what it's all about, is that these people are going to train you. You've got to believe in yourself. I mean, one of the fears you got to get over is the fact that if you've done well in the past, you're going to do well in the future. It's not like your stocks in the stock market, where past performance is not future performance. It is in this world. So if you're not coachable, the people I think I have some of the most challenges with are younger entrepreneurs that have got a lot of energy, that have got their own ideas on that, that want to do their own thing, and they're kind of comparing franchising to see if that's a good fit. And a lot of them, I'll say, they give you a lot of leeway in franchising to be creative. But if you really want to go out there and do it, just go out there and build up your own business. We'll turn it into a franchise at one point in time. However, on the flip side of that, my entrepreneurs that have been around for a long time and just want to get into another business, my older entrepreneurs, I just tell them, you've run 5, 10 businesses, you've built them up, you've grown them. Why are you coming to me? Do it yourself.
Yeah.
Like, no. I've done all that. I know what it takes to build up a business. I don't want to do that again.
Right.
I want to just step into something that I can just take off running.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it too. And that's a good point about entrepreneurs, because sometimes you don't want to have, I saw, some reality show where they help people with franchises or their different restaurants and stuff like that. And the guy was trying to do his whole own thing with the friend, like he was trying to make up his own menu and add items in the and so I think that's important too, is to know their system and everything's in place for a reason as a franchise, and there's not a lot of leeway, and it's like the items are the items and you have to stick with that. But that should be beneficial to a lot of people because there's already a system and structure in place instead of like,
Yeah, you point out that was something like that was on The Founder with Michael Keaton on the McDonald's show, where the gentleman was selling his franchises as semi-absentee to people who wanted to start doing their own thing on there. And that's a good show to watch. It kind of gives you a good idea about how franchising works in a way, in that if you turn your business into a franchise, you've really got to think about who it is that you want to run that franchise. And you found that in his case, where he's turning it over to semi-absentee people, they wanted to just start putting their own menu items in there, and it just wasn't working. And so, and the same with the franchise world. I mean, you can be creative. And I put a person into a tutoring franchise over in Las Vegas. She was she was CEO at a hotel, something like that. And she said, "You guys aren't hitting up the hotels at all with your business." I go, "That's not our model. We've never tried that before, but feel free, go for it." She did. It didn't work. But so she went and switched back over to the model they did, and they let her. But that's a good point, Tony, is that you can stick with that model. They've got it there because it's worked. They've done it before. But at some point in time, if you feel like you want to be creative, they will allow you to go out there and try new and different things.
Awesome. All right. Hey, Greg, man, this, again, fantastic. Lots of great information. I'd like to transition this now into something that we call the final round. You've done this before, and not too long ago, the last time you were on the show. But for those that haven't listened to that show, they can see how you are when you get asked these tough questions in the end here. But if you're ready to go, we will get that party started.
Let's go.
Right. Awesome. So Tanya, I'll kick it off to you to start.
Okay. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made when it comes to your finances or business life?
Took out all the money I needed to buy this house from my 401k plan.
And why would you say that was a mistake? Yeah, what? Tell people why.
Because you had to pay I think I had to pay 10% extra for the house on the penalties on that one. I'm not too sure I ever bothered to calculate it out, see if it was worth it in the end, but I didn't want to get another loan. So like, I want that house. I want to now just take this money out. And it's like, wow, that's a big chunk of penalty I got to pay on that. And so that was not good. That was not good.
Yeah.
Ouch.
It's a good
Okay.
one.
Man, all right. Well, okay, so this kind of ties in, this next question kind of ties into that, but what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first started out?
That people need somebody that's going to be understanding, patient, persistent, and caring on that. I try to just, especially when I just started out as a franchisee and an entrepreneur, I show people my telecommunications plan and say, this is the data. It's great data. Look at it. It shows how much you're going to make, how much money you're going to save on this plan. You got to do it. They tell me no. I just say, okay, and walk away. Okay. You got to learn how to sell yourself one way or the other, whatever you're doing out there in the world today. I wish I'd known more about how to sell myself and how to work with others in the process of selling myself and being patient, understanding what their needs are. It took me a while after I first became an entrepreneur to learn that. Zig Ziglar was a good book to read, his books on that. A good Christian guy, good way that you help people get what they want in life. You get what you want in life. Sales is something you do with somebody, not to somebody. So I wish I'd known before I became an entrepreneur. I wish I'd done more in the way of learning how to work with others in the sales type environment.
Yeah, that's really good. And do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to someone that's just getting started in entrepreneurship or franchising specifically, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, read up on it. There's plenty of books out there, and not just mine. Those are a good start.
Although, yes.
Yeah, although yeah, buy that book now. It's going fast. Production is ending. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. Read up on it. Start doing that. Look around at the different establishments that you go to on a regular basis and find out if they're franchises or not. And the ones that you visit on a regular basis that you find out are franchises, go in there and talk with the people that are doing it. If you can find the owner or the owners of that, talk with them, get to know how and why did they get into it and how has it worked out for them.
Awesome. Go to like a franchising mixer, so to say.
Education.
There you
Always
go.
about-
Yeah, education. I love that. Education is so important. I think in anything that you do, right, you should learn about it first before just jumping right in. Okay, Greg, final question of the final round, and I will preface this with besides your own, because we kind of talked about it already, and we will again in a second. But do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast, or both?
Well, I just listened to Mike on his podcast. That's about all the podcasts I ever listen to. That's all I need to listen to on that one. There's a real estate investing book. No, because I don't do a whole lot of real estate investing. If you want good books that are going to help you become an entrepreneur on that, then Zig Ziglar, it's a good book to read. I've already mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki. There's a couple of them on Robert Kiyosaki's books to read. on that. He probably has something on Secrets of the Rich and all that. Read those books. And then if you're going out there, Jeff, get more. Yeah, get him something like that. He's a good one. Because when you're getting out in the world of entrepreneurship, no matter what you're doing, you're working with other people, you got to sell yourself, get to know those books. Those are the guys and girls I like.
Yeah, the sales and that mindset piece is huge. I love that. And where can people find more information about you? Where can they look you up and get connected with you if they want to do that?
You go to my website, franchisemaven.com. That's franchise, M-A-V as in Victor, E-N.com. You can email me at greg@franchisemaven.com or just pick up the phone and give me a call at 361-772-6401. And although I say to go buy my book on Amazon, I'll actually give you a PDF version for free on the front page of the website. You can just go there and download the PDF version. I prefer to buy it, but you can have the free PDF version right there if you'd like.
That's great.
All right, awesome. Yeah, hey, make that easy for everybody. We'll have those links in the show notes just so you can go in there and copy and paste and click away. But as I always say, please do not do that if you're driving right now. Hey, so Greg, I just want to ask you one more thing just to kind of close things out. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience today?
Franchising is a good option to look at, and it's always good to have the options. Again, it is not right for everybody on that, and I won't try and convince you it is on that, but it's good to compare your options on that, because we didn't really go into the differences between privately owned businesses and franchises and the good and bad points about each, but there's good and bad points about each. So yeah, good to have options. Check it out as an option.
All right, fantastic. Hey, Greg, this has been awesome. Thank you again so much for joining us on the show today, joining me and Tanya. We genuinely appreciate it. This was phenomenal, as was last time, but lots of great information for my audience. Go listen, go read his book, right? Go check it out. Listen to other podcasts he's been on, because Greg is spitting some good information here, especially for those of you that might want to get into franchising. But again, thank you so much, Greg. And I also want to thank all of you listeners. Thank you so much for joining me, Tanya, and our special guest, Greg, on the Average Joe Finances podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much, Greg. And don't forget to leave that 5-star review if you guys found this useful today, and let us know what you liked about it.
All right. Aloha from Hawaii.
And Lake Tahoe.
And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.